Right now, there might be a sound in your room you can't hear, not a quiet sound, a sound your ears physically cannot detect. But your body hears it. It tightens your chest. It puts a knot in your stomach. It makes you feel, for no reason you can name, that something in the room is wrong. For centuries, people felt this and called it a ghost. They were wrong. But what's actually happening is so much stranger. To understand it, we have to go back to a laboratory in Warwick, England, in the late 1990s. A man named Vic Tandy was working there late one night. He was an engineer, a skeptic with no patience for ghost stories, and his lab had a reputation. Co-workers complained of cold spots. People said the room felt oppressive, like you were being watched. A cleaner had reportedly quit after seeing something she couldn't explain. Tandy thought all of it was nonsense. Then it happened to him. Working alone, he was suddenly drenched in a cold sweat. His whole body went tense. He became certain, with no evidence at all, that he was not alone. And then, at the very edge of his vision, a grey shape began to form. Something tall and indistinct standing just beside him. His heart was pounding. He turned to face it directly, and it was gone. Now, here's the difference between Tandy and almost everyone else this happens to. He didn't run, he didn't pray, he didn't tell himself a story about spirits. He was a scientist. The next morning, he went back to find out what had actually been in that room with him, and he found it completely by accident. Tandy was also a competitive fencer, and he'd brought his sword in to work on it. He clamped the blade upright in a vise, and as he stepped away, the blade started to vibrate on its own. Nothing was touching it. The tip whipped back and forth in the empty air, as if an invisible finger were dragging along the metal. Most people would have backed out of that room and never returned, but Tandy saw something nobody else had seen. He saw a clue. If that blade was moving, something was pushing it. Something was feeding it energy over and over at exactly the right rhythm to make it swing. There was a force in that room. It just wasn't supernatural. It was a sound. Not a sound he could hear. A sound underneath hearing. We call it infrasound. Your ears pick up sounds down to about 20 cycles per second, 20 hertz. Below that, the world doesn't go silent. It just goes inaudible. The waves are still moving through the air, through the walls, through you. You just can't consciously detect them. And Tandy's lab was full of it. He moved that vise around the room with the vibrating blade, watching where the shaking got stronger and where it died. The vibration peaked in the dead center of the lab and faded to nothing at the walls. That's the signature of a standing wave, a sound bouncing between two surfaces and reinforcing itself into a stationary pattern of energy. He measured it. The frequency was 18.98 hertz, and the source was almost laughably ordinary. A new extractor fan had recently been installed. It was humming out a tone far too low for any human to hear, and the length of the room happened to match its wavelength perfectly. When he switched the fan off, the haunting stopped. Cold spots, dread, the figure in the corner, all of it gone. But that left the strangest question of all. If nobody could hear the sound, how was it making people see a ghost? The answer is hiding inside your own eyes. In 1977, NASA published a technical report on what vibration does to the human body because they needed to know what astronauts could survive. And buried in that research was a very specific number. The human eyeball has a resonant frequency of around 18 hertz. Resonance is what happens when you push something at exactly its natural rhythm, the way a tiny shove at the right moment sends a swing higher and higher. Hit an object at its resonant frequency and it starts to vibrate on its own. Tandy's fan was humming at almost exactly that number, which means that everyone in that lab had their eyeballs gently vibrating in their skulls without knowing it. Not enough to feel, just enough to smear the edges of their vision. And when you smear the very edge of human sight, your brain does what it always does with a blurry shape it can't identify. It invents one. It fills the gap with a figure, a grey, indistinct person standing just beside you that vanishes the instant you look straight at it. Tandy hadn't seen a ghost. He'd seen the inside of his own visual system vibrating. And here's where it gets worse. Because it isn't only your eyes. 19 hertz sits dangerously close to the resonant frequency of a lot of the human body, your chest cavity, your internal organs. When infrasound at the right intensity passes through you, it doesn't just blur your vision, it can press on your lungs and make breathing feel slightly difficult. It can vibrate through your chest in a way your brain interprets as fear, because a pounding, tightening chest is the body's universal signal that something is wrong. Your conscious mind has no idea why, it just receives the symptoms of terror with no cause attached. So it goes looking for one, and in an empty room at night, it reaches for the oldest explanation we have. Someone is here. Something is watching. This is the part that should unsettle you. The feeling of being haunted, the cold dread, the racing heart, the certainty that you're not alone. None of it requires anything to actually be there. It can be manufactured, on demand, with a sound you cannot hear. And in 2003, a team of scientists proved it on 700 people at once. A psychologist named Richard Wiseman and an acoustic scientist named Richard Lord ran an experiment at a concert hall in London. They built a sound source out of a 7-meter sewer pipe capable of pumping out a tone at 17 hertz, right at the edge of hearing. Then they staged a live concert for around 700 people, 4 pieces of music, and underneath 2 of them, without telling anyone, they layered in the silent 17 hertz tone. The audience couldn't hear it. They had no idea which songs carried it and which didn't. But afterward, when researchers asked them to describe how each piece made them feel, the results were impossible to ignore. During the pieces laced with infrasound, the number of people reporting strange experiences jumped by 22%. Chills down the spine, sudden sorrow, anxiety, a pressure on the chest, the feeling of revulsion, a sense that something was wrong, rolling through a crowd of hundreds of people, triggered by a sound not one of them could consciously detect. So now look at what this actually means. Every haunted house, every basement that makes your skin crawl, every old building where people swear they feel a presence. A huge number of those places have one thing in common that nobody thinks to check. Machinery, old fans, boilers, pipes, traffic rumbling through the foundations, wind moving across the structure. All of it can generate exactly this kind of low-frequency standing wave. The places we call haunted may simply be the places that are humming at a frequency our bodies recognize as a threat. But here's the twist that catches both sides off guard. The skeptic who tells you it's all in your head is wrong, and the believer who tells you it's a spirit is wrong, because the dread is completely real. It's happening in your body, it's measurable, and it's also completely physical, with a cause you could switch off at the wall. The truth was never the comfortable answer on either side. It was the stranger thing sitting in between, and it didn't end in 2003. In recent years, researchers have started looking at what this silent sound does to us over the long term. One study found that exposure to infrasound can quietly raise your levels of cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. Cortisol is useful in short bursts. It is not meant to run all day, which raises a genuinely uncomfortable possibility. The people who live next to a busy road, who work near industrial machinery, who sleep in an old building that hums, they may be carrying around a low, constant background of stress they can't hear, can't see, and have no way to identify. A dread with no story attached to it, coming from a sound that was never trying to mean anything at all. So tonight, when you're alone in a room and it suddenly feels wrong, when the hair stands up on your arms and some animal part of you insists that you're being watched, you don't have to be afraid of what's in the room with you, but it might be worth asking a different question. Not who is here, but what in this room is making a sound you were never built to hear. Because for your whole life, your body has been listening to things your mind was never allowed to know about. And every now and then, it tries to warn you in the only language it has left. A chill, a knot in your stomach, the feeling of a ghost.